Hey everybody, it is Professor Parish and we are on English 109 week 3. So I'm recording this Saturday night, so if you've not turned in the module 2 assignments, those are due by Sunday. But we have a few assignments this week, so I wanted to go ahead and go over it. Just to go ahead and let you all know, SIC is celebrating Juneteenth, which is a nationally recognized holiday. We're celebrating it on Monday, so SIC will be closed Monday and will be open Tuesday through Thursday this week. I'm taking off Wednesday, so I'll be on campus Tuesday and Thursday. If you need to ask me any questions, I'll be checking my email, all that fun stuff, but just to let you all give a heads up. So as far as week 3 goes, let's go to the module guide here. I'll post our lecture video in there. We've got our paper 2 guidelines, which we are going to look at here. Our next paper, which is going to be on poetry. And so we're starting poetry. We're only going to spend a couple weeks on poetry. I feel like this section of our class, students either really like poetry or they don't like poetry. And my goal as the instructor for this section is to at least give you an appreciation of poetry. So even if you don't like poetry, I want you to walk away from this class with the understanding at least a little bit about poetry and its elements, and to have an appreciation of it. And the good news is that most of the stuff we've talked about in short stories will go ahead and transfer and apply to poetry itself. So character development, plot, setting, the symbolism, the imagery, it's all transferring to poetry. In our old textbook for English 122, which I loved that textbook, the first section of poetry started out with a picture of Michael Jordan. And if you don't know who Michael Jordan is, he was a basketball player. If you've ever seen Space Jam from the 90s, that movie, it's Michael Jordan was in it. And so I had a lot of students ask, why would Michael Jordan be on the front cover of the poetry section? And I always loved that, because if you grew up in the 90s or you knew Michael Jordan, he's kind of like the Stephen Curry of basketball, or the LeBron James or Kobe Bryant. He was always known as one of the best players in basketball. And that's kind of the textbook related Michael Jordan as being the metaphor for what poetry is to language itself. Poetry is the best of language. If you are a poet or if you write poems, you're always trying to find the best wording, the best language to use to convey those emotions and thoughts and imagery that you're trying to establish in a poem. And there's bad poetry out there, but good poetry chooses its words so carefully and constructs it in such a way to convey that emotion. And poetry is used as therapy. It's used in so many different ways and contexts. And the nice thing about poetry that I think a lot of people gravitate towards is you don't have to have characters. You don't have to have a plot. You can just talk about the emotionality of something or how you feel about a topic. And it can be free form. It doesn't have to rhyme. It can just be a string of words and thoughts and ideas and emotions that are all tied together, and that's poetry. I think a lot of people don't like poetry because it can be very abstract. It can be the author may not give its readers any context, and it may not explain its reasoning to readers. So readers kind of have to figure it out for themselves. And a lot of readers don't like that. They want structure, they want characters and plot. They don't want to sit there and stew on emotions, and that's fine. But these first couple of chapters are going to talk about kind of the foundations of poetry. So the first chapter, there's a section on reading a poem on page 692 to 706. There's a section called Listening to a Voice on page 707. There's a section Words on page 731. Saying and Suggestion on 753. Imagery on 766, which I highly recommend. Imagery is a nice chapter to go through. And then Figures of Speech, which is on page 785. And then there's a section called Writing About a Poem on page 1808. So definitely, if you've never written about poetry or critically analyzed it before, I would suggest looking at that section on writing about a poem. And so our assignments for this week is that we have a discussion forum, our short story exam, which I'll show you all that, the reading response, and the paper 2 thesis and outline, which is about poetry. So let's go ahead and look at paper 2's guidelines. So the paper 2 guidelines, you have 2 options for this paper. You can do either one of 2 things. Option 1 is you can construct 2 poems of your own that are, similar and different. Then you can compare and contrast them and use terminology from our textbook to describe how the 2 poems you created are similar and different. That's paper 1. Paper 2 option is you can do a compare and contrast of 2 or more poems from our textbook. So you can either write 2 poems of your own and compare and contrast them in an analysis, or you can analyze 2 poems from our textbook and how they're similar and different. So you either get to be creative with it, or you can choose it out of the book if you don't want to be creative. One of those two. So the total page length, including your analysis and your poems, should be 3 full pages, right? And these are not long poems. They can be short poems that you're writing there, but it should be 3 full pages of analysis, not including the poems. Your analysis itself should be at least 2 full pages, right? Your analysis should be at least 2 full pages, and that 3rd page, if you're writing poetry, it should be a 3rd page of poems. But here's the thing. This is the caveat, okay? So if you chose option 1 and you're constructing 2 poems of your own, and then you're going to analyze them, one of those 3 pages can be the 2 poems that you made, okay? The other 2 pages will be your analysis. If you chose option 2, where you're comparing and contrasting 2 poems from the book, it needs to be 3 full pages, right? Not 2, because you're not writing your own poems, right? So I had a student in the past, all they did was copy and paste the poem from their book and then did 2 pages of analysis. And I'm like, no, that's not it. If you wrote your own poems, you can call one of those pages as your own for writing your own poetry and then analyze it in 2 pages to have 3 total. But if you're not writing poetry and you're just analyzing 2 poems from our textbook, then it needs to be 3 full pages of analysis, because you're not getting credit for not writing your own poem, right? So you can email me if you have questions about that, but it has to be 3 full pages. If you're doing the creative writing option, one of those pages is for your poems, the other 2 are for analysis. If you chose option 2, then all 3 pages are analyzing and comparing and contrasting the 2 poems. So those are your options there. You will need to cite your textbook, because even if you chose option 1 where you're writing your own poems, you are still comparing and contrasting them using terminology from our textbook. So your textbook should be cited in MLA. If you use any other outside sources, they need to be cited in MLA as well. Now, you need to have a separate works cited page and then in-text citations for your sources, okay? And then if you have questions about MLA, in the module for, let me go back here. Up here towards the top there is an MLA citation presentation, and you can review that, and it will go over MLA questions that I was going to do this, closer when we get to our research paper, but you can scroll through this. And if you scroll towards the bottom of the PowerPoint, it's going to tell you how to cite and do in-text citations. It's going to tell you how to cite different documents. You can scroll through this. It's a pretty elaborate PowerPoint. I took the time to craft it so it could answer a bunch of questions. When we get closer to your research paper, I'll talk more about it, but it's always here in that first module under course instructor information. It is there for you to use if you need a backup, okay? So as far as when the paper is due, your topic is due this coming Sunday, the 26th. Your first draft is due Sunday, July 3rd. And then if you choose to revise, those revisions will be July 17th, okay? So your paper 2 thesis and outline is just going to be you telling me which option are you going to do. Are you going to write your own poems and analyze them, or are you going to compare and contrast 2 poems of your own? Or from the textbook, sorry. You're either going to tell me which options you're going to choose there, either A or B. And then I just want to know kind of like a rough outline of what you think you're going to write about. This paper thesis and outline is usually the toughest for the class, because a lot of people, they're like, I don't know what exactly I'm going to do, but I mainly want to know what poems are you going to compare and contrast if you chose from your textbook, and then what are you going to talk about with them? Again, that can be a work in progress, bare bones outline. And then if you chose the creative writing option, I'm going to be like, okay, well, what are your poems going to be about, and what are you going to talk about with them? Are you going to analyze the imagery? Are you going to compare and contrast their rhyme scheme, their pattern? What are you going to do? And again, this is all work in progress. It's just to keep you with some kind of outline so you're not scrambling at the last minute to try to write this paper. All right, so that's the thesis and outline assignment. And then the short story exam. So now that we've sadly finished short story, you do have a short quiz on it. It's worth 25 points. I'm going to show you what it looks like. So if you click this to take it, it is not timed and it is open book. So you can take as much time as you want on this, but you only get one chance to do the exam. So as you'll see, there's a section on matching. So you'll match the term with its definition. All right. Question 2 is going to ask, like, what are protagonists and antagonists in the story? Question 4 is going to be to match the narrators with their descriptions. Question 4 is what's the difference between flat and round characters? List and describe the term irony and the 4 types of irony described in our tone and style chapter. Define genre and list 2 texts that would fit into 2 genres from our textbook and tell me what they are. So if it was like Stephen King's it would be horror. And then that's it. There are 6 questions on this magnificent short story exam, but it's worth 25 points altogether. So it'll tell you how many points each question is worth in the corner. So again, this should not take a crazy amount of time. You can see here that it shows exactly how much time you've taken on it and when it's due, but that's pretty much the short story exam. Nothing crazy. I'm not a big exam person, so I try to make them pretty simple. And then our reading response number 3 is going to look at 4 poems from between chapters 15 and 20. This will give you a chance to actually read some poetry from our textbook. There's so many poems, I could not decide which ones to read. So I was like, you know what? I'm gonna let y'all pick. So as long as they're from chapters 15 to 20, you can pick any 4 poems that you like. Just whichever poems you choose. I wanna know, question 1, what were those 4 poems? Why'd you pick them? Question 2, based on the terminology in chapters 15 through 20, which term fits each poem that you chose best and why? So if you chose a sonnet, does sonnet fit it best? Is it imagery? Is it pattern? Is it word choice? Is it tone, style? What term from that chapter, if you picked a poem from chapter 15, what term from chapter 15 fits it best is what I mean. And then number 3, which poem was your favorite and why? And which poem did you like the least and why? So those are pretty open-ended questions, but your response should be about a page in length, double space, and you're just answering the questions based on the poems that you picked. And then finally, our last assignment is going to be the discussion forum. And so there's this link here called Poetry Out Loud, and then I'll go ahead and click on it and show you all what it looks like. It is, oh no! How dare they? I'm gonna go to the home page. Oh my gosh, I'm so sorry, y'all. I'm gonna re-upload this link. I'm glad I did that in this video. So I'm gonna go to browse collections here. So I'm gonna send you all this link. I'm gonna go ahead and change that. Make it, so basically I'm gonna go back here and edit this because I can't believe that link expired. How dare they? So I'm gonna go ahead and edit that so you guys can see. Okay. So now let's try this again. There we go. All right. So you guys will see on here that there are different categories that these poems all go in. There's music and dance, sorrow and grief, the sporting life, humor and satire, war poetry, ties. There's actually 3 pages. There's eerie poems. There's social justice and equality. There's LGBTQ. There's Black history and culture. There's 3 pages of different poems. And so I want you to click on one. So let's do the sporting life. And so you'll see on here that there are just poems that you can click on. All right, let's do the fishing one. So if I click on the fishing poem, it is going to give us the actual poem itself and the bio of the poet. All right. So with the topic this week, now some of these I am going to change it up because some of these don't exactly give you a option to listen to the poem, which is sad. I'm sad they've changed that on here, but some of the poems do. So I'm going to edit this a little bit. Okay, so I tweaked that a little bit. So if your poem has the option to listen to it, you can listen to the poem or you can just read it. But the questions are, which poem did you choose and why? Reading the poem versus hearing it spoken, what was the biggest difference you would expect? And explain your answer, especially if you were able to listen to your poem. So if your poem you picked did not come with an audio option, then just tell me if it was spoken out loud, what would be the difference versus just reading it. So that's how you would answer question number 2. And then of the terminology in our poetry chapters so far, which term do you find most interesting? And explain your answer. So this site has lots and lots of different poems. So you're going to be able to find a ton of different options to listen to. So it really just depends on what type of poem you really want to hear. So, or see. So yeah, that's basically the discussion forum for this week. Again, if you have not turned in paper 1 for week 2, make sure you do that. It's due Sunday the 19th. It's worth 100 points, so it's definitely one that you don't want to miss out on. But as always, if you guys have any questions about week 3, please let me know. I'll be on campus on Tuesday and Thursday, and I'll be answering my email those days. And I should be able to get on Monday night and answer emails, but since it's a holiday, I may be off the computer that day. So if you have any questions, just let me know. But otherwise, I hope you all have a wonderful week. Please stay safe, take care, and I'll see you all next week for more with English 122. Bye.